I'd like to call this Planning and Zoning Commission meeting to order on this Thursday, April 23rd, 2026. And could we please have roll call?
Commissioner Perry,
Here.
Commissioner Holland,
Here.
Commissioner Leonard,
Here.
Chair Chapman,
Here.
Vice Chair Spada,
Here.
Commissioner Everett,
Here.
Commissioner Bash.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Could you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And we go to our Citizens Director. Trevor, do we have any current events or reports tonight?
Thank you, Chair, members of the Commission. So a few meetings ago, I mentioned that we were going to bring forward a discussion item for battery energy storage systems. We are still working on some final tweaks to that draft, so we are not quite ready yet, but we are targeting the May 21st meeting to bring that forward to you to discuss.
Okay, thank you. Then we start with our consent item number 1.
Consideration and action to approve or disapprove the April 2nd, 2026 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further questions? And please vote.
Motion passes with 6 votes in favor.
Okay, thank you. We move on to item number 2, regular agenda item. It's a non-public hearing.
Presentation and discussion pertaining to a zoning text amendment, ZTA, to the Surprise Land Development Ordinances, LDO, to establish a new residential zoning district, Desert Rural, DR, case FS 25-0039.
Okay,
Good evening, Chair, Commission. We are here tonight to present information, answer questions, and solicit feedback regarding FS 25-0039, a zoning text amendment to establish a new residential zoning district, Desert Rural. So as there are numerous sections of code involved in this amendment, in order to make this presentation more digestible, we've broken it into 2 parts. So the first part, which we're going to be covering tonight, is going to be going over the background information of the zoning text amendment, as well as the community feedback and proposed code changes associated with permissible uses, development standards, and land use buffer and landscape/open space subjects. In the second part, which we will cover at the work session on May 7th, we will go over the community feedback and the proposed code changes associated with the remaining topics of interest. That's going to be for the design standards, animals, and transportation/street sections of the code. We will also be addressing the many cleanup items that we are including in this proposed amendment. And in order to foster a more fruitful conversation as we go through each topic of interest, we're going to be presenting the relevant information and then stopping to answer questions because it's kind of a lot to be able to get through. So with that, I'll pass it over to Trevor.
Thank you, Chair and Commission. We're going to pass back and forth the presentation tonight. So with the ratification of the 2040 general plan, we included the rural residential overlay that identified areas of the overall planning area that are longstanding rural communities that we received feedback from residents on wanting to be protected from encroaching development, as well as preserving their existing way of life. And so this slide here shows that overall rural residential overlay within the general plan. That general plan also talks about creating a desert rural zoning district, which is this effort that we're bringing forward. So to help explain this exhibit a little bit, the combination of the blue and red is the overall boundaries of the overlay as it exists in the general plan. The areas in red are not currently incorporated within city boundaries. Those are currently county, but in our planning area. The areas in blue are the areas that are within city boundaries currently that would be subject to these proposed text amendments.
Alrighty, so with that out of the way, we'll go ahead and jump into the background for this project. So as I mentioned earlier, the purpose of the zoning text amendment is to revise sections of the Surprise Land Development Ordinance to establish a new residential zoning district, Desert Rural. And the intent behind creating this new zoning district is, like Trevor was mentioning earlier, to preserve the character of the city's long-established rural residential neighborhoods by creating a unique set of development standards for these areas. So in order to accomplish this, there are a couple things that we got to do. So we're overall looking at adding a new zoning designation to the land development ordinance first and foremost. But there are also going to be supporting revisions that are required for the development standards, design standards, and engineering standards as well. So that we're looking at changes to not only the LDO, but the municipal code and the EDS, which you guys won't vote on it, but we wanted to include those changes just for transparency so you could see kind of how all of that is going to be affected. So while some of these changes proposed will actually change what is permissible, something I wanted to note is that a significant portion of the changes that we're proposing are actually more kind of like clerical in nature and are more kind of a cleanup. So, we're trying to like add new standards, but in order for us to do that in a way that's, both easy and understandable, there's some kind of like foundational things that we need to fix before we do that, or kind of at the same time. So it's not only easy to see what it is, but it's also easy to understand the changes that we're looking at making. So why create a whole new zoning district? So first and foremost, we're creating the zoning district to implement the vision of the rural residential overlay as outlined in the Surprise 2040 general plan. While conducting outreach for the Surprise 2040 general plan, we received significant feedback from the rural residential community centered around preserving the character of their communities. And this feedback ended up leading to the shaping of the general plan and kind of informed some pieces that were incorporated in, as again, Trevor was mentioning, the rural residential overlay. So as a part of that, it not only, adopted that new kind of land use character sub area there, outlining the boundaries of those different neighborhoods that are affected, but it also established, a vision for that area. And in order to implement that vision, which includes things like transitions in density and, land use buffers between those existing rural residential neighborhoods and incoming development, it also specifically calls for the Desert Rural Zoning District in order to implement that.
So how have we ensured that this text amendment kind of is in support of and helps to implement the overlay of the general plan? So we wanted to make sure that this was an effort that we did in concert with the community that it most greatly impacts. This is something that came about to us through feedback from these rural residents that was implemented into the general plan and then voted on by them. So we wanted to make sure that throughout the process that they were heavily involved. So you can see that this has been a long process with a lot of outreach and communication with those groups. So it's been about 2 years. We've had a total of 12 outreach meetings. 6 of those have been with the rural community off of 219th and Deer Valley, and 4 of them have been with the overall greater rural residential community. 2 of the meetings actually presented iterations of the draft, and some of the other ones were, to go over very specific topics, to gather feedback, present ideas, work through some of the issues and feedback that we're receiving. You can see here the meeting attendance that we've had throughout the process. I would say that, we've had a tremendous amount of public input and participation and feedback, which is always positive for us, especially when we're creating something for these residents. And so it's been a very fruitful process thus far. So as a result of all of those meetings and the feedback that we've gathered and the conversation that we've had, all of that information can for the most part be truncated down into these main topics that we've focused on for the text amendment. So that's permissible uses within the desert rural areas, development standards that would be applied to these properties, land use buffers to help protect them from encroaching developments, different design standards. So that's, accessory uses or accessory structures, driveway and parking allowances and surfaces, fencing material, landscaping requirements. We've also, animals was a big thing for them because they're in these rural areas. Our existing codes were a little too restrictive for what they either currently do or would like to do. And then transportation and street improvement requirements.
So starting with permissible uses, the overarching feedback we received from the community is that there is a desire for certain commercial uses in desert rural, but in accessory to a single family home as a home occupation, as opposed to having a standalone kind of brick and mortar development. So from this feedback that we received, the following uses were initially proposed by the community to be allowed as home occupations in desert rural, specifically with CUP approval renewed every 24 months. So that's small farms and plant nurseries, motor vehicle repair, vet clinics and animal boarding, horse and livestock boarding, storage of vehicles, materials and equipment, and temporary RV parking. So in order to address those comments, we are proposing the following changes to the LDO. So firstly, we're going to be, we're proposing to add desert rural as a zoning district to the land use matrix with permissible uses largely mirroring what's already currently allowed in RR, minus standalone commercial uses, which are being removed and, they'll be prohibited in desert rural. And then the other feedback that we received was that the community wanted community facilities, public facilities, and bed and breakfast establishments to require a CUP as opposed to being either permitted by right or requiring an AUP. The other thing that we were looking at doing is moving the home occupation section into its own chapter and establishing a classification system, as well as adding the following uses as permissible home occupations in desert rural. Specifically, that would be a class 3 use. So we were specifically looking at adding animal clinics and vet offices, cottage food, ranch, and residential farm. So part of the reason why we weren't able to incorporate, or why it looks like we're not incorporating all of the specific uses that were kind of requested was we were either able to incorporate them in different ways. So for example, there were like nursery uses and stuff that were requested. Those can kind of go under farming. So they may kind of, look a little different, or we were able to incorporate it in a different way. For some of those other uses, for example, like the motor vehicle repair, while the community initially, or we got some initial feedback, wanting those kinds of uses, whenever we, posed that question to the community later and we got more feedback, we kind of got mixed reviews on some people wanted motor vehicle repair in their neighborhoods, some people didn't. So that's kind of where we ended up, kind of soliciting feedback, doing some research, and then kind of ultimately landing on, there's kind of a reason why some of these are not incorporated or aren't traditionally allowed as home occupations. So we'll leave those alone and, leave them off. The last thing that we were looking at amending is amending the use specific standards section to be more specifically regarding like the general standards for ranch and residential farm uses, and making sure that whenever we were, adding those new uses to the class 3, home occupation that's specifically for desert rural, that the general standards and stuff that we were putting in for that kind of matched across the board, so that whenever, more for like consistency's sake, so that, if we are requiring certain things in the home occupation, that those base standards kind of match whether or not you are doing it as a home occupation or you're doing it, just for your own personal use. For example, if you have a farm. Really where that gets more important, or part of the reason why we have that distinction between, listing specifically ranch uses and farm uses in use specific standards, and then listing them again in the home occupation section, is because one of the things that was really communicated to us that people really wanted to have was their farm stands. So, they have their, farm that's an accessory to their home, and they want to be able to sell, their eggs, their vegetables, whatever have you, kind of in the front of their home. And kind of the best way that we could figure how to do that would be to, again, create standards for, in the use specific standards section. So if you just wanted to have like a farm for your personal use, but you were going to be, again, selling those eggs off site, and not having that farm stand kind of component, then you could do that and you wouldn't be burdened with having to go through, permitting and stuff with us. You wouldn't have to go through and get an AUP or anything like that. So we wanted to be able to, again, make sure that if we were allowing these uses, so again, specifically wanting to regulate people, again, selling their goods and stuff, or again, specifically like their vegetables and eggs and their, front yard, that we were able to allow that use without putting an overly, burdensome requirement on people who, again, just wanted to have a farm or ranch, but not have that business component. So I realized that was kind of a lot. So I'll kind of stop there for right now. If we have any questions, I can get into a little bit more of the minutia of, kind of some of the structural changes, as well as some of the other kind of things that we were looking at changing within the home occupation section specifically, because what ended up happening was we wanted to be able to add these uses specifically for desert rural, but with the way that our, home occupation section is currently set up, it's kind of a one size fits all situation. So it has a bunch of standards that are kind of all listed together, and it's kind of on both like the citizen and staff to kind of like read through that list, see what that person is proposing, and then kind of figure out like what generally applies to them, what doesn't. So kind of like the easiest way that we were, thinking that we could be able to add those home occupations, with those use specific standards to make sure that, those uses would be compatible, and then be able to, add in those requirements for like an AUP or a CUP that would be renewable every, 1 to 2 years or something like that. The easiest way for us to be able to do that was kind of revamp that whole home occupation section and kind of add structure back in there, and set up a classification system so that it's really super clear, not only to citizens and staff, what kind of use is allowed in which classification and what specific standards and requirements go with each of those classes. Because again, right now it's kind of all just like mushed together into one area, and it requires a determination pretty much every time you're looking at that. So again, there are some other things that we were looking at changing as a part of the cleanup, in order to address some of the code complaints and like parking issues, because specifically, and then you can answer some questions later if we need to. But we've been getting a lot of code complaints in the last however many years regarding not only like traffic, but parking specifically in relation to these home occupations. So one of the general things that we were looking at doing, in addition to adding those uses in specifically for desert rural, and then amending the structure so that it'd be easier to like read and follow exactly what's required. There were some other minor content things that we were looking at to address those parking issues. For example, like limiting the employees that are allowed, outside of the dwelling. I think currently right now, we allow the people who are currently residing in the dwelling, as well as immediate family members and 2 non-residents of that dwelling, to be, employed and kind of operate out of that, home occupation. So we would be looking at limiting, basically removing that requirement, except for desert rural where they have, those larger lots to be able to kind of accommodate the parking of, employees and stuff that they have coming in and out. We were also looking at adding additional language or changing some language around so that it's very clear that when you are using your accessory structures or, your garage, for your home occupation, that if you're using that space, that you're not going to be reducing the amount of parking that you would have otherwise. So if you have a garage and it has 2 parking spaces on the inside, you're more than welcome to use it, but make sure that you're using it in a way where you're not removing those 2 parking spaces. The other thing that we were looking at is kind of that restriction of, if you have employees and there are very specific uses where you'd have, customers, where you'd have customers coming to the home, trying to amend that section so that instead of, us permitting parking on that on the street, home occupations would be required to have that parking as much as possible, accommodated on their lot. And then the other thing that we were looking to clarify, and we have this in our code currently, and a lot of other cities in the area, also kind of address it in a vague way. But in terms of talking about traffic and, again, customers visiting and kind of how that alters, or the fact that it's not supposed to alter the character of the neighborhood, we have tried to kind of quantify how many trips, it would be or would be permitted before you start to get into, the range where it starts to really kind of affect the character of the neighborhood. Our transportation department was able to give us a trip estimate, and it's 16 trips, a trip being one way and one back. Total of 16 trips is about what they estimate on average for a single family home. So we have tried to, again, to make it a little bit more clear and to try to quantify that instead of addressing it as, hey, you can't have enough customers or whatever that's going to, create that, kind of like character changing issue. We are proposing to limit for those specific uses. That's going to be like tutoring, swim lessons, firearm sales that's required by federal law to take place, at the home, daycares. Those specific uses would have limited customer interaction at the home. They'd be limited by appointment, and it would be limited to 8 appointments a day in order to not exceed that, kind of 16 trips or, 8 total people. So again, sorry if that's a lot, but if you have any questions, shoot away.
It doesn't call for a public hearing, but I would like to know if,
Sorry, Chair, just to clarify, we're just pausing. At this
Okay.
point, we're not done with our full presentation, just to see if there was any questions that the commission might have right now.
just a second, how much further do we need to go here? We have about the same amount left.
We're about halfway through.
Okay. Let me go ahead, Commissioner.
Two questions. How are we going to be able to enforce this limit on the trips? Just curious. I'm sure there's a plan. I just don't know.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, Commissioner. So part of our business license review for home occupations is they have to explain their operations as, and we compare that to being in compliance with whatever the codes are. They also, the applicant is required to sign a form that states that they've read and understand the requirements. And then at that point, if the business license is approved and issued and they operate, if we get a complaint and we find out that, you know, they're exceeding the amount of trips that they stated that they would be, then we would proceed from there.
Okay, that makes sense. I was just curious. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. Three questions that are administrative, and if you're going to cover them later, just tell me and I'll let you do it. So one is, what if there's somebody who's now in a county area that wants to be annexed into the city of Surprise, but is within these limits? Is this going to be mandatory? Is it up to them? Is it a one-time offer, or is it something that they can get through a period of time?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, Commissioner. So there is some additional research that we do need to do on that, but essentially when property gets annexed, at the time of annexation, it gets assigned a like-for-like zoning. So there's some comparisons that we need to do between rural residential and desert rural, comparing that to county RU 43 zoning to determine what is the most like-for-like zoning designation. So upon annexation, they would be assigned that like-for-like. They could, at that time, do a rezone request as well to choose. Being under the overlay gives them the option of, you know, sticking with rural residential or going to the desert rural.
Commissioner Perry.
Thank you, Chairman. Second question has to do with much of this overlay is not in the city limits. In fact, I don't know what percentage, but it looks just by eye to be over 80% of it would not be within city limits. And the reason that I ask this question is there going to be any restrictions if someone buys a piece of property that's currently county, for example, wants to be annexed into the city? They would be annexed in as the rural desert overlay, but that isn't what they wanted. Would the annexation process be different than it would be today for that type of thing?
Thank you. So their annexation would just need to be accompanied by a rezone to request the zoning district that they would want if it is different than what would be automatically assigned upon annexation.
And then the third question of an administrative nature would be, say someone in the middle of this area buys 200 acres and it's zoned desert rural, and it is surrounded on at least 75% of the boundaries by other desert rural overlays, but they want to do something like commercial. Are there any restrictions or in terms of getting that zoning change? Or would it be like any other that they'd have to come to planning and zoning and then go to city council, and that would be the end of the process?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. So when we created the desert rural overlay within the general plan, we assigned it to existing rural communities. So there shouldn't be a lot of undeveloped acreage that's in that overlay. For the most part, it's already been developed with rural residential communities. But if there were an instance where, you know, someone wanted to come in and rezone to commercial and they were within the desert rural overlay, it would go through the rezone process. We would obviously, as staff, evaluate it against the general plan and the intent of the general plan, and then bring it forward to commission and council. And you know, as the commission and as the council, they would have to determine whether or not to approve that. If it's within the desert rural overlay, you could argue that that is not in compliance with the general plan, being that it's meant to be rural residential, essentially. But if there was an adjacent property that's not within the overlay that wants to rezone to commercial, it would be the standard rezone process, but they would have to understand that there's some implications on their zoning and their eventual development being adjacent to that overlay.
That answers my question. Thank you, Trevor.
Yes, Commissioner Hall.
So I have a comment as I was reading through this and thinking about it, and you went through the permissible uses. Specifically, I note and totally understand why it's requested there be no standalone commercial uses in this area. That said, I wonder if cutting off all standalone commercial uses would truly be desirable. For instance, one of the allowed home occupation uses includes animal clinics and vet offices. To have a vet office that's by itself might be desirable. You can have more equipment there. You can have more accessibility to get your animal in and out, as opposed to taking somebody's house and putting in their barn or whatever is happening, an ancillary building. It might be desirable that way. Additionally, with residential farms, if you look at like the East Valley, the orange orchards, they have quite the orchard stands out there, and they're still family run, but they look more like a family run but commercial style and sized entity. And because of that, they can bring in commercial equipment. They have more. They can get a larger electricity and so forth, utilities out there to make it more desirable to come to that stand. Where I grew up, I grew up in Southeast Arizona. There's a place where they sell apples, and apples are a big deal. And those apple stands, they sure start looking like stores, and they're desirable. They still are very hometown, very homey, very personalized and family run. There's also pumpkin patches and things like that are out there that I wonder if cutting out all standalone commercial uses is truly what's wanted. Now, I know that there isn't necessarily that sort of stuff going on right now, and I recognize that everybody's looking for their small stand, but I could also see that someone might want to have something a little bit larger, a little bit nicer. We're not talking about huge, and so perhaps limiting size. And I know devil is in the details when we write these things, and bless you for the behemoth task that you have undertaken for doing this. But I'm wondering if truly carving out and getting rid of all commercial uses, standalone uses, would truly be desirable and fit what would be a really fun kind of community style location where they can sell their wares and so forth. So perhaps limiting the size, limiting the gross output, something along those lines, to limit it, but not necessarily to do away with them in its entirety. So that was my thought as I was going through this. Additionally, another thought along those lines would be signage for these stands and so forth. I don't know if we're getting to sign requirements and signage. You know, somebody spray paints a board and puts it on the side of the road. Well, that wouldn't necessarily fly within the city limits. Perhaps in the county, they don't necessarily enforce that sort of stuff when it's way out there, but I wonder if signage has been taken into account or thought. I didn't see it. I'm sure you guys are on it. I'm just throwing it out there as I think about the different signs that I've seen for those type of home uses. So at the same time, I also see, vehicle repair. Those things can get noisy and big, and I don't want to say that nobody can work on cars or help their buddy out or even repair a car for profit. But at the same time, I've seen some pretty large sheds out there or garages where they can put hydraulic lifts and so forth in a location like that and do some real work out there. So if that's just attached to the home, you might have a commercial use that's already there. And so if you just say anything goes that's already existing without kind of limiting the size of it, I mean, you can have a fairly sizable essentially commercial garage out there that's being run, which is what they were trying to limit and get rid of to begin with. So I think in the sizing might be the way to go as opposed to prohibiting all commercial uses. So those are my thoughts.
Commissioner Bash.
Chairman, I get a feeling that surprised this is a unique zoning district, that there really isn't a whole lot of charted waters out there to follow. And I commend you with the behemoth process you're taking on, and he just added more to it.
Sorry.
But the signage is a very good point.
Yeah. It is.
I mean, this is going to trickle down
Very
through
good.
probably a lot of the ordinances.
Yeah, thank you, both of you commissioners. So just to quickly answer some of your questions, we have thought about the signage as it relates to farm stands. So when we come back for the official public hearing and you receive the full text amendment, you'll see that is addressed in there. As part of this meeting tonight, it's for presentation and discussion purposes, so no action, but we would like to get your concurrence and direction. So I guess my question to you as a body is, while the feedback that we started with from the community was not to have standalone commercial, maybe to dive in that a little bit more, they wanted to make sure that they're preserving the existing character of their communities. They didn't want it to turn into commercial businesses where, you don't know your neighbor or the owner of the business. They wanted to keep it very community oriented. You know all your neighbors, you know what they do, what they're up to, that sort of thing. So that is why we wrote this in that fashion of not opening it up to commercial development, especially since it's also a residential zoning district. But if there is some feedback or direction that you all would like to provide to us to maybe look into some of the specifically allowed home occupation uses as it relates to commercial, we can certainly do that.
Yes, I have a question about, I guess, the boundaries. If you have, let's say somebody bought a 9-acre piece of property, 3 acre by 3 by 3, and you've got anywhere from 50 to 150 feet, if it's a commercial, I imagine, or residential span there. That's out of that first 300 feet, if it's just one side, that's like 2 acres out of 3 that person would basically not be able to utilize. How is this going to work with like an acre or 2 acres or whatever it is when you have another piece of property like commercial or residential? How's that going to work? And I was thinking of the farm stand. It may start out real small, and then pretty soon they've got a piece of property there with they decided to build on. Would that be permissible? In other words, how is this going to work?
Chair, yeah, thank you. So I guess to your first question, are you referencing the buffer setback
Yes.
requirements? Yeah. So If a development is coming in adjacent to Desert Rural after Desert Rural has been established and the rezone has taken place, staff would obviously make them aware of those setback requirements and those implications of being adjacent to these areas, and they would have to accommodate for that. Now, if there's existing entitlements out there today or that are done prior to the rezoning happening, they'd obviously be able to develop under their existing entitlements. But as you know, through some of the zoning actions that have come before you all in recent years, knowing that this is happening, some of those developers have already incorporated some of that buffering and setback into their development plans already.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
Just a comment. I sat in on the meetings with the citizens, and when you're speaking of a smaller commercial type situation, I don't think the citizens are going to go for it. And that's putting it mildly. I think that they are very concerned about keeping the character that they have, and it would be frowned upon by those current citizens. Future, who knows? But those current citizens, they would not stand for it. They really want to keep the character that they have now. They're not interested in even a little bit changing and growing. They want to maintain their rural character. So I don't know if maybe something down the road could be looked at, but I just think that you guys are going to get a lot of pushback if that gets mentioned. It doesn't hurt to mention it, but I think be prepared for the pushback.
Well, if I might, Chair.
Commissioner Allen.
Thank you. I think the idea and what I'm suggesting isn't necessarily to change the character of what they have right now, so much as the language incorporates or at least captures the essence and idea that they're looking to have. For example, if somebody's repairing cars and they build, because on my land out there, I can build a 300-foot shed if I want to, metal building, and have 5 or 10 bays. Well, I'm just as much a commercial entity as anybody down the street is. Probably I'm bigger than that, and I'm allowed to do that out there today. Now, if on the other hand I go next door and build that same shed, but by itself, that's prohibited. But if I build it next door to my house on my same lot, it's allowed. I think that's what they're looking to avoid, is that big behemoth commercial entity or commercial enterprise coming in. On the other hand, as I mentioned, a farm stand, sometimes those can grow. If you have chickens, they lay eggs, you get a rooster, you have chicks. More chickens lay more eggs, you have more eggs to sell. We can get into all sorts of fun stuff, but now you have more eggs, you need more space on your cart. And so you build a little bit more and you build a little bit more. It doesn't mean that you're going to open up a Safeway or a Fry's. It means that you want a larger stand. And we want to encourage them to have larger stands. And perhaps my lot, because I have a mobile home on it, isn't sufficient, but the lot next door, I can go ahead and put that on the lot next door and have it stand alone. Well, technically, that's a commercial enterprise that's standing alone by itself, even though it's the lot adjacent to mine. So it wouldn't be permissible under this, even though that's what they're looking for. So my suggestion is that we not take away the standalone commercial uses so much as we limit the size of those things. That will keep the big box stores out, which is really what they're looking for. That will keep the large franchised groups from coming in and establishing and recreating what's already there, or just changing what's there to something different, but still allow the citizenry that's out there to grow their small mom and pop business that they want to run from their house. And so that's all I'm suggesting. And I think limiting the size perhaps is probably the better bet than simply saying this use is permitted. Because you come to me, I can say, hey, the use is permitted. Let's build that 50 bay garage out there and we're going to run a massive semi truck, diesel repair truck station out there, but it's permitted.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, is there going to be a residency requirement? Means the owner must be there and not somebody, a commercial piece of, let's say, property wants to buy this, so they buy the house and they rent it out, and then they have their 16 bay or 50 bay, thing. So I was just wondering, how would that work?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So as long as we keep it the way it's currently structured, where these commercial type uses are allowed as accessory to a single family residence under the home occupation section, our home occupations do require them to be owner occupied.
Okay. That's Commissioner Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A brief comment that's obvious, but sometimes we forget. And the only reason I'm bringing it up is because I went through this at a meeting that I was presiding at for a different organization earlier this week. In 2000, the city of Surprise had under 35,000 people in it. In 2026, we estimate that we're just under 180,000. Phoenix in 2000 was not in the top 5 cities in its size in the United States. Today, it's the 5th largest city in the United States. I'm troubled when I go to meetings because people who bought here 20 and 30 years ago want to keep their lifestyle. But the reality is 30 miles down the road is the 5th biggest city in the United States. And managing that is a Scythian task because I don't know how we are going to grow as we need to grow as a city and do this. Right now, we have a transportation problem. And we have a transportation problem because we do not have a core in this city, especially for good paying jobs. Peoria does, Buckeye does, Goodyear does. All of those cities have several thousand acres that they have dedicated to industrial development. We don't have that here. So we have to face a transportation issue because our citizens have to go there to work, which means we need more roads. And at the same point in time, we're dealing with the reality of keeping a rural lifestyle. So I'm not saying this because I have a solution. I'm just saying, as a planning and zoning commissioner, this is something that I really struggle with in saying, how does this city progress? Because we will be 220,000 people unless something happens in the economy in the next 5 or 10 years. And at the same time, by the nature, we're going to have a different character in 2030 than we had in 2020 and then that we had in 2000. And I think that that's a big balancing act for us as commissioners and for you in our development committee to deal with. And I'll just end my comments at that. But that's a reality that I think we all have to keep in mind as we move forward on this. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Any other commissioners? I guess we could move on then, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. So moving on to development standards, this was actually probably one of the easier sections to accommodate, knowing that the existing rural areas were happy with their minimum 1 acre lot size requirements, minimum or maximum 1 dwelling unit per acre, maximum 2 stories. So the feedback that we got was from a development standard standpoint, they are good with what they have. So our proposal essentially just mirrors the existing rural residential development standards assigned to that zoning district, pulling those over into the desert rural zoning district. The land use buffers was one of the larger topics of conversation as we discussed a little bit previously. So the feedback that we initially got was they wanted to see 100 to 150 foot buffer between desert rural and any new neighborhoods encroaching in around them. They wanted to see a transition in density from desert rural with that lower density abutting them and then going into higher density as the farther away that the developments get. And then within those buffer areas, keeping it natural desert. So the changes that we're proposing establish a series of setbacks associated with each of the zoning districts within the code. They range from 50 feet to 150 feet, but within each zoning district, it specifically talks about how and where that would be applied. So for example, in R1, if R1 was coming in adjacent to desert rural, based off of the lot size that they're abutting that existing community with, would dictate their setbacks. So we have an exhibit here that kind of shows. So on the left there, sorry, John.
Go ahead.
You can see my mouse here. If the development was proposing 1 acre lots adjacent to the existing desert rural community, then there wouldn't have that buffer or setback requirement associated with it because it's a like for like lot size. The smaller the lot that they're providing at that nexus, the larger the setback would be. And then going into some of the more intense uses like commercial, industrial, mixed use, those would just have the standard 150 foot setback that they would have to provide. Any questions on any of those 2 topics before I move on to the next? Okay.
Awesome. So that's going to conclude part 1 of our presentation. So part 2 is going to be, like we said, on May 7th. We are going to be starting conversations kind of similarly with council on the 5th to also get their feedback. That's basically where we're at right now is we're going through the last of the community feedback that we received at our neighborhood meeting that was held in March. Now we're coming to you guys for your comments and feedback. We're also coming to City Council for comments and feedback. So as of right now, we don't have any public hearing dates set for the near future. We're going to work through what we got first, and then once we get through some of that extra work that we still have to do, then we will be bringing this back to you. And when we do schedule those public hearings, you will have a ledge edit in front of you, even though it's monstrous. But we will make sure that everybody has plenty of time to be able to look through that thoroughly. So just again, as a reminder, part 2, we're going to be looking at the design standards, animals, transportation, streets. Will also be, again, covering some of the other cleanup items that we're going to be including. And if anybody has any remaining questions, we're here for those.
And if I could share real quick, one more thing. A few of you alluded to the amount of work that this undertaking has been, and I just want to make sure that you all know that Johnny has been the project manager on this the whole way through. So the credit goes to her. She has been working with all of the residents, going through all the feedback, writing all the code. So it has been quite an undertaking over the past 2 years. We think we're in a good spot, but obviously, we're here to get your feedback and direction and consensus going forward.
Thank you. And I'm going to have you stay for a second. And I will once again ask for anyone that would like to speak from the public about this particular issue. If you have, if you've had anybody that has turned in.
Yes, Chair, I have Alex Christ.
Alex, could you please state your name and where you live, sir?
Pardon me. Alex Christ at 175th and Waddell. Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioners, thank you so much. This is why I love living in the city of Surprise, because you put our residents first. And I appreciate all the hard work that they're doing, especially in this area. I have been an advocate for this area because, as I put it one time, this is for the people who love living in the boonies. They want to be as far away from the city, but close enough to get some of the benefits. And Commissioner Perry, Commissioner Holland, thank you so much for raising those questions as well. And the map that I saw, as much as I appreciate it, I just wish that we had more. I just wish that some of these developers would see the benefit of not this urban sprawl, but especially out there in such beautiful deserty areas, that we can have 2, 3, maybe 4 acres for those that can afford that much, but it's so beautiful out there and it's so peaceful. And as you have these little islands of desert rural, you're still going to have the development. You're still going to have the issues of the traffic that's going to be coming around, but I do appreciate all the hard work that that has been going through, and the residents up there too. I've been to some of the council meetings where many of these residents have come up and just want to be heard, they want their lifestyle, not totally not to change, because we know change is coming, but to at least keep it to where they can continue to enjoy it. And so Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioners, thank you so much. I always love coming to meetings like this because it proves to me that the city of Surprise is managing what is coming. As Commissioner Perry had said, 180,000 from 30,000. I've seen that growth, so I know what's coming and what's happening. So I just hope that you continue to ask those questions, that you continue, to advocate for them, especially the people that have horses and goats and things like that. I love them. I love seeing that, especially somebody writing down, and most of these are streets that are not even paved. They're still, dirt roads. I love seeing that. That is our Western heritage, and I just hope that doesn't change. But thank you so much, and thank you to Mr. Abrams and everybody that is working on this. And I appreciate you allowing me to speak even when it's not open to the public. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sarah, do we have anyone else?
No, Chair.
Okay. I'd like to open it up for public for first, any other questions? Okay, thank you. Gee, what a great job you guys are doing. It's very complex and doing a very fine job, and you got a ways to go yet, it looks like, too. So you're moving the right direction. Thank you very much for your hard work. I'd also like to open up this for a non-agenda item. Is there anyone that'd like to speak on a non-agenda item? Sarah, do we have?
Yes, Chair. We have received 2 emails to the P&Z inbox, both in opposition of the DHS facility. They have been passed on to management and to the commission. We also do have one here in person, Matthew Ragsdale.
Okay, if you please state your name and where you live.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm Matthew Ragsdale at 2636 Grand Avenue, San Diego, California. I'm with Key Capture Energy. We are a battery energy storage developer and operator, and I'm joined by a few of my colleagues, Chris and Norm. We understand that, and I lead development of projects in Arizona, including one here in Surprise. We understand that the BESS ordinance is no longer on the agenda for tonight, but we thought it would be nice to come introduce ourselves, talk about Key Capture if you have any questions, answer any questions, and also make ourselves and offer ourselves as a resource as a company in the industry to the commission if that's desired. And so going forward, we understand that there will be workshops upcoming for the BESS ordinance and much more to come there. And so we'll likely you'll be seeing more of us in the future, and we'll be around. And so what that looks like tonight, we'd happy to answer any questions you may have about BESS, the industry, hear any concerns. For example, Norm is an expert on the BESS technology and can answer anything about that. And then also going forward with some of these upcoming workshops. I think Trevor mentioned potentially one on May 21st. We'd like to offer ourselves as a resource. We have a lot of expertise both within key capture, engineers, BESS experts, and also third-party consultants and organizations that we work with on fire, safety, and everything to do with BESS. And so we'd invite the opportunity to present and bring some of those people along, but really just in general answer any questions that you may have, hear any concerns, and make ourselves available.
Just to mention that it's a non-agenda item. We can't really discuss with you the item that you're talking about.
Sure.
But we will be appreciative of you coming this next meeting.
Two meetings.
Two meetings. Okay. And so we'll be ready for you then.
Great. Well, we appreciate it. And thank you guys for the time tonight and the opportunity to speak with you all.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, is there any other business that the commission's interested in, any future agenda item? If not, then I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved and second. Could you please voice vote? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those no. Then the ayes have it, and we will adjourn.